Welcome back to Montreal Now. You're with Justine McIntyre and Sarah Deshaies until 6 o'clock this evening. We're going to be speaking now with guest Robert Libman. He's the former Equality Party MNA and he's also the Gazette political columnist. We decided that we wanted to have a conversation with him because he published an opinion piece a couple of days ago asking the question, should Montreal be looked at as a city-state? And this is basically arising from Montreal's difference with the rest of Quebec. So the fact that we have a very diverse population, we have an English population within the city, we tend to have ideological differences as well when it comes to Quebec politics. We kind of tend to do our own thing in Montreal. Should Montreal be a city-state? Robert Libman joins us right now. Hello, Robert.
Good afternoon, Justine and Sarah. How are you?
We're doing well, and we're interested to know, what is it that made you decide to ask this question right now?
Well, during the summer, being out and about in Montreal, whether it's at the festivals in Old Montreal, downtown, it becomes very, very clear that Montreal is very diverse. Montreal is exciting. You hear many different languages. You see the faces and the garb of many different cultures and incredible diversity, which is very much counterintuitive when you think of what's been going on over the past several years, where the provincial and federal governments have been adopting legislation about their perception of what Quebec should be, what Quebec could be, and trying to marginalize minority communities. Yet when you walk the streets of Montreal, you see a very, very different reality, almost to the point where I think a wake-up call is needed. Minority communities exist, other languages and cultures exist, and these laws, this festival of laws that we've seen over the last couple of years, Bill 96, Bill 21, Bill 40, Bill 23, of course, the federal government's Bill C-13, these laws seem to try to negate or camouflage a physical and social reality that is Montreal, which is the heart of Quebec. And I think we have to announce that loudly and clearly, that Montreal is very different from the rest of Quebec, is different from the rest of Quebec as Quebec is different from the rest of Canada. And I think there should be some pushback. And that's why I raised this notion. That's what prompted this column, as a matter of fact.
It's a very interesting debate for sure. And I think anybody who lives in Montreal or who has visited Montreal would agree with you that it is a very diverse city. However, I'm going to suggest to you that perhaps one of the things that makes it so livable and that makes our diversity so enjoyable is the fact that we have a sort of a laissez-faire atmosphere that we've developed, to live and let live. There's a lot of casual interaction between Francophone and Anglophone communities, and we've come to a place of what some people call reasonable accommodation. And my question is, why would you want to throw a wrench in that by making it official? Because official bilingualism is really a complete it's more of a bureaucratic notion than anything else, because it's not, I think we would agree on one thing, it's not going to change anything on the ground.
Well, no, everyone agrees. Everyone lives together. Everyone gets along. No one is forcing a wrench into the equation. It's just to get their hands off of what they're doing in institutionalizing unilingualism. I think you have to look at it from the other perspective. Instead of trying to make Montreal bilingual, we're saying Montreal should have special status. Montreal should be able to live as a cosmopolitan, multicultural, multilingual city without provincial legislation that forces us to be something that we're not. As I said, you'll never take Montreal out of Montreal, and I think it's time Quebec politicians start to realize, or Quebec nationalists start to realize, who have been pushing for these laws, that Montreal will never become homogenized. Montreal is what it is, and instead of forcing this cloak of specific language regime on Montreal, we should let Montreal flourish. We should give Montreal every opportunity we can for it to flourish economically. We're the economic engine of the province. And Montreal, instead of being forced to comply with certain people's perception of how monolithic Quebec should be, Montreal should be given every opportunity to thrive. So we haven't, it's just a way of phrasing it, but I think certainly Montreal should be given every opportunity to thrive financially, thrive economically, and have its own independence or status so that it can be as competitive as possible with some of the other cities. You certainly know, having been a municipal councillor, you certainly know, Justine, how Montreal has been held back relative to other cities over the past 30, 40, 50 years because of the constitutional uncertainty, because of some of these language rules and regulations that scare people off. I think if we go along with how you describe it as a laissez-faire attitude, I think Montreal would flourish and regain some of its past glory that we used to enjoy.
Robert Libman is a columnist with the Montreal Gazette. So, Robert, how would you pitch this to someone in Quebec City to get them on board with the idea of giving Montreal more independence? What incentive is there?
It's certainly not going to happen anytime soon. As you know, in Quebec, sometimes linguistic nationalism often trumps economic common sense. So it's certainly not something that will happen easily. And municipalities are creatures of the provincial government. So in the current context, this is certainly a long shot. But I think we have to start the conversation. Montreal has to be given every opportunity to thrive. Montreal shouldn't be subject to some of the restrictive notions that have been forced upon us recently. And in the same way, as I said in the column, in the same way that the notion of Quebec's distinctiveness within Canada began with conversation, began with recognizing its distinctiveness, Montreal should be proud and should announce loud and clear that we are distinctive. We will always be like this. We will not be forced into this box, and we want to be able to thrive. And that's how it should happen. Montrealers themselves are the only ones that can start this conversation. And
but how would you pitch it? How would you get someone from Quebec City on board, though? Like, what advantages?
Are you talking about a Quebec City bureaucrat? Are you talking about a Quebec government politician?
A politician or a bureaucrat, someone who's outside the province who would probably have some sort of say or like need to sign off on this to some degree. Like, how would you pitch this as a win-win for people outside of Montreal? Because I think there has to be buy-in, not from people, not just who live on the city.
I think what has to be drilled into people's heads is that Montreal is not going to change. They're not going to change Montreal. They're not going to take Montreal out of Montreal. And it's high time to initiate a conversation so that people recognize that instead of hampering our economic development, it's best for the entire province. It's best for all of Quebec economically if Montreal were to thrive as best as it can. So instead of focusing on trying to make Montreal something that it's not, let Montreal flourish economically. Let Montreal benefit from all potential tools that any economic philosophy can grant upon Montreal, and let Montreal flourish, and all of Quebec will benefit economically from that.
Robert, I think that I'm agreeing with you on some of this, but perhaps not agreeing with you on the approach. And you did bring up when I was a city councillor that I would have seen some of these things. And I do recall one of the debates that we had in city council, because there is a tremendous amount of casual bilingualism that goes on in City Hall, as you know. So we have a lot of English-speaking city councillors who stand up and speak in English, and there's a lot of that casual exchange that goes on. So there's sort of an unofficial bilingualism in City Hall itself. But when you bring it up as a formality, the debate very quickly becomes contentious, and people's guard goes up right away. So that's my concern. We saw it also with the attempt to unify the city of Montreal with the une île, une ville, and then we saw municipalities breaking off saying, we don't want to be a part of this. So my concern is always when we try to officially change status, that's where things can really turn sour, and that might just serve to sour Montreal's relationship with Quebec.
Well, is there any need to officialize it, or is what I'm suggesting let Montreal be exempt from some of the language restrictions that exist? And I think that's what's important. I think Montreal also has to be given taxation powers, special status to be able to benefit. As you know full well, when the Grand Prix, for example, comes to Montreal, Montreal has to clean up, Montreal has to maintain its streets, Montreal has to pay for policing, yet every single cent of revenue from sales taxes go to other levels of government. So there's got to be special status granted to Montreal so that Montreal can thrive economically. And part of being able to thrive economically, I think, is to take Montreal out of this language regime that's forced legislation on Montreal that hampers business, that makes it less attractive for head offices. It makes it less attractive to invite tech companies to come establish themselves here. I think it's a combination of laissez-faire, or maybe laissez-faire is a better way of putting it. Instead of giving us bilingual status, perhaps the better way is to take away any unilingual status from Montreal to make Montreal able to thrive economically.
Robert, it's always great to get your thoughts here on Montreal. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Take care.
Thanks, Robert.
Bye-bye.
Robert Libman writes columns for the Montreal Gazette, former politician as well. You're listening to Montreal Now. After the 5:30 news, we are going to touch base with someone who's done a study on why immigration is the future for this country.